What's up, everybody? This is David Castillo from Saint Vitus Bar, and welcome to the age of quarantine. We got Prince Terrence with us today, an incredible multi-instrumentalist, DJ, singer, drummer extraordinaire, has played with incredible people, and yeah, man, just one of my favorite people in New York. Really talented, super fucking cool, and looking forward to just talking with him today. So once we get Terry on here, we'll get started, and I hope everyone's having a wonderful Friday. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you bought some music today. It's a Bandcamp Friday. There's still plenty of time to do that, so go and buy that. And yeah, man, Terry's right here, so let's get started. Okay,
Hey,
Terry,
what's up,
there he
man?
is. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I love
Nice.
I love the purple. You look
Thanks,
good.
man.
You look good with the purple. This is
Thank
very on brand. This is very Prince Terrence
Yeah, gotta
for
keep the
me.
aesthetic.
Gotta keep that's
For
what
sure.
that could be the name of the interview. You gotta keep the aesthetic.
Yeah,
So
man.
we're here with Prince Terrence. Terrence, I start all of these interviews the same way, which is if you weren't at home, do you know where you would be right now? Would you be on the road? Would you be
Right now,
DJing?
what's today? Friday? Yeah, I would definitely be DJing.
Yeah.
This
Well,
actually, it's weird because I have my headphones on and I haven't worn them since I last DJ'd, which was in March. And it's the
oh,
longest I've ever, you know,
wow. Yeah,
it's
that
kind of
is,
a bittersweet moment.
huh? Yeah, that is pretty crazy. Yeah, just to kind of think about, just how far away, all those things have been, and things that seemed really routine once
Oh,
upon a
man.
time really melted away pretty quickly, right?
For sure. Totally.
For real, for real. So, with these, I'd like to just kind of start off and really just kind of get into kind of earliest musical moments and kind of build the narrative, the story into what you've sort of become today as a musician and as a person.
Hmm.
So, one of my, first questions usually is just what were some early memories of music, and when did you kind of realize that you were kind of inclined towards music?
Oh man, earliest memories of music. I was literally just talking about this with my wife earlier, like, because my son is like he's 6 now, and he's finally getting to that age where you start to kind of like have favorite songs, and you kind of start to like sing along to real songs rather than like little baby songs, you know?
Yeah, yeah, like what's on the radio or something you hear.
Yeah, yeah. So like he's super into like I'm starting him chronologically, so I'm not going right into like 20 like where we are right now. Like I'm starting at the beginning, like literally classical music. He loves classical music, but
Ah,
then I'm taking him to where I started out, which is gets to your question, which was like when I was his age. I remember having a Prince poster on my bedroom wall, and like as a kid, it was like all Prince and Michael Jackson because I was born in the '80s. That was kind of what was going on. I was born in Detroit, so Motown was a heavy influence in my childhood musical influences. You know.
yeah, definitely. So that was kind of like the earliest thing for me too. I mean, when I was a little guy, I was like 5 years old in 1988, and like Prince and Michael Jackson, and just they were larger than life. And my family is Colombian, so it was some of the only kind of English sung music that I really first remember like hearing, which was what was on radio everywhere. That and like George Michael too is like a huge like I remember this when I was like a kid, you know.
Yeah, totally. That was what. Yeah, I mean, and that was the thing. Is like back then we didn't know it, but the songs that we were hearing on the radio would be like classic songs, like George Michael songs, Prince songs, Michael Jackson songs, like all Madonna, all those songs that we were just like, oh, whatever. Like it was like now it would be the flavor of the week, but then
Yeah,
it was like they still exist, you know.
yeah, definitely,
So
absolutely. And when did you find yourself kind of drawn into like kind of that gravitational pull when you were like, did you have anybody in your family who played like music or instruments, or was it some like how did you start kind of coming towards like playing a little bit?
I think it was mostly like, oh, you mean like for actually playing?
Yeah, for actually playing.
Yeah, but I mean, I was, you know how like when you're little you can see, like, you kind of gravitate towards things.
Yeah.
And when I look at photos of me as a child, like, I always had a guitar in my hand, or I had like a Walkman on, or I had like a toy drum kit, like every photo. And it was like, I really think that people grow up to not be that much different than they were when they were 5 or 6 years old, like really figuring out who they are, you know?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I feel like I just stayed on that path, and like I always felt a pull to music, and it wasn't always playing necessarily. Like it started out as like just a fan of music, you know, dancing in leather Michael Jackson pants around the house or whatever, and like you know, that kind of stuff. But then I guess when I got older, I was like, man, I actually wanted to play, and like I hated church so much, like I really hated it. But I would go with my mom just to see the drummer play, and like the energy in like the church, like how the church drummers play, is like very similar to punk rock. It's just like the beats are just, and it's like there's energy and everyone's going off, like in the black church. I don't know what it's like, and you know, but like
not too many people going off in the church that I went to, bro.
Yeah, it's like people are going off, feigning and shit. Like it's just like to the drums, to a drum beat, and a dude just like, yeah, like, you know what I mean. And so it was like that was my first. I was like, man, I want to do something that's gonna have that impact on people. I want to do something that's gonna make people lose their minds.
And that's a really interesting thing too, because again, you were saying it's kind of like, yo, we're like young. You're like a kid, and you're just witnessing like kind of this, you know, power of music and what it does to people, and you're not even sure which form you want to take it, but you're like, hey, like I like what the scenario is here. I'm willing to go through church in Kentucky, right? Because you were at that point, maybe you were a little bit older. When did you move to Louisville?
Yeah, I moved to Louisville when I was in first grade, so around the age of 6 or 7.
So we're talking like some more southern, like black church experience.
Yeah, like black Southern Baptist church, like it looked like a shack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was the real deal, you know.
Yeah, so from then it was like the drums that captivated you first.
Yeah, so that was the thing, is like and then my grandfather actually, you know, like I hated church, and I wasn't like, I was listening to, like, by that age, I was like at the church age when I really caught on to, like, when I was pulled to the drums. I think I was older then. I was probably like 12 or 13, maybe 14. But you know, I was listening to, between then, I always grew up listening to rock and roll, because like I would sit in front of the TV and watch MTV before my mom took me to school in the morning. So it was all like Whitesnake and fucking Warren, you know what I mean? Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
And being from Kentucky, like I lived in the suburbs. That was what the kids at my school were listening to also, and the kids that I played baseball with and shit. So it was kind of like I gravitated towards that music. So I was always into heavier music, but like that's why I liked the church. I like, in my own mind, I guess I was like so bored. I was like, I see how I can flip this into something that I could like actually be into. If I'm gonna have to go to church, I'll just psych myself out into thinking that it's a punk show or whatever.
Yeah. Like I'm gonna take the elements of what I can from this if I have to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then and also you're like, hey, but you know what? If I can learn these skills, maybe I can turn it around into a cooler context, right?
Yeah, totally. So it was like my grandfather was the church guy, so we were all going for him. But so he's the one that bought me my first drum kit, because I was like, yeah, I want to be like him, the church drummer, you know. So then I was like, how could he say no?
Yeah, right. I mean, Gramps is coming with the drum kit. It's time to commit, right?
Yeah. Little did he know I was gonna use it to make dark music.
Yeah.
Totally. Antithesis of that.
The Hustle Club video, you know. But so when you started drumming and stuff like that, and I guess, you know, at the time, like you were saying, you were playing baseball. A lot of the people, you know, like, you know, you were kind of MTV, kind of like big rotation, kind of like like hair metal stuff and stuff like that? Was that kind of the
Yeah.
stuff that you started kind of like just playing along with and being like, hey, I want to just try and do this?
Well, by that time, I was a little bit more. I was a little older, so I was kind of like. I think my references were a little bit more. My influences were a little bit more like advanced. Like I always knew when I was even in middle school, I was always the kid that like tried to shock my friends by bringing in a CD that they had never heard of. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
you're
as a
that guy.
yeah, I was that guy. I was like, oh, I bet you never heard like because you could go to the record store and just to like HMV in the mall or whatever, and you could like just look at find the coolest album cover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I actually like the first CD I bought was like Lords of Acid, Voodoo You, when I was in
Oh, wow.
like 7th grade, only because it had like naked neon girls on it. So I like brought it as a 7th grader to show my friends, at the lunch
Yeah,
table.
like I got the hot shit. Check
Yeah,
this out.
little did I know that it was like S&M, like rave music. But I actually listened to it, which is weird because it comes kind of full circle in that way.
Yeah, it really does for you.
But with by that time I was listening to Nirvana and Rage Against the Machine and Pearl Jam, all the shit that like was happening in the 90s,
Sure.
So like the way that I actually let me rewind a little bit. The way that I actually like learned how to play drums was so my best friend Brad, who he plays in the band The Bronx now. We were in all of our entire time in Louisville, like we were in a band together called Christensen. We were on Revelation Records.
Yes.
And we actually learned our instruments together. Like we were like, all right, let's stop watching these music videos on TV. Let's start our own band, So he learns he had a guitar, and then we had another friend that was everyone plays guitar. So he was like, I'll play bass. So he starts taking bass lessons at this place called Mom's Music. It's like a mom and pop's music store in Louisville. So like for the 30-minute bass lesson that he had, I would go with him and sit in the drum room and just play drums the whole time. Because I didn't own my own kit at that time. So I would just play on the demo kits the entire time that he was in the lesson.
That's great.
This was before the Guitar Center kind of like explosion. I don't even know if Guitar Center was around. Definitely wasn't in Louisville at that time.
Cool.
So like, I was just in there playing, like literally learning how to play drums for just that short a period of time while he was in his bass lesson. And then I just kept playing, like eventually my grandfather bought me that kit. I would play on desks at school because we didn't live in a place that was conducive to like me having my own drum kit at home. So literally like at school I learned how to play with my hands on a desk at school. So it's
Got it.
Yeah.
So, and that's really amazing too, because you're just like, hey, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, I'm gonna find a way to still express myself, even though I don't have the right tool or the tools of the trade like in front of me. I'm still gonna kind of like use my creativity to kind of like overcome that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and it's pretty amazing how kids are like that too. Like you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah, that's what kind of I just had to like. I knew what I wanted to do, and I just had to like kind of make it happen with what I had,
So when did you, and I guess Brad and you seem to be like on this parallel journey together, as a rhythm section, because I know you guys from, Christensen first. So when you started kind of discovering more kind of hardcore music and post-hardcore and stuff like that, how did you guys kind of get involved with the scene and kind of start getting into more underground tunes?
It's kind of funny, like, so we had another friend. We both played sports this whole time, so we're kind of like, we were like the weirdos of like the sports team, like of like the athletic guys in our friend circle, And
yeah.
So, but everyone was listening to Nirvana. Everyone was listening to the rock and roll that was the grunge stuff that was on the radio. Like everyone was listening to Pearl Jam. So one day I was like at my friend's house, my friend who like I played football with, and his sister had a boyfriend there that was like this punk rock dude. And he was talking to us about music, or talking to me specifically about music, and he was like, what are you into? I think I probably said something like, wow, you look cool, or whatever, something like that at that time, because like I didn't really. My mom wouldn't let me dress like that, like back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So like it was that early, you know. So this guy, I'm like, yeah, dude, I love Rage Against the Machine. I really like Rage Against the Machine. And he's like, oh, you like Rage Against the Machine? You should check out Quicksand. They sound exactly like Rage Against the Machine. And I was like, oh shit, really? Like, and me being the guy that wanted to be different and always wanted to find, like, shock my friends with music that they had never heard of, I immediately, like, bought a Quicksand record. And then he told me about, through Quicksand I learned about Inside Out, which is Zach from Rage Against the Machine's other band that, fast forward, would be on the label that I eventually signed to, Revelation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's crazy because he basically like tricked me into being into underground music. Like
Yeah, kind of like just I kind of have a similar story like that as well, where I was dating a girl and her best friend's sister was dating Ed from Taking Back Sunday, and I was into a couple of things. It was sort of like on the cusp, and then I met Ed, and then I learned so much more about like Long Island hardcore and like my kind of local scene and like all sorts of stuff too. So it's amazing, like just one little connection, really random, and now all of a sudden you're into like a brand new world, right?
Yeah, man, it's weird. Like, and it was like when I found out about Quicksand, it just like opened up my whole world to like underground music, and I was like, that was the end, you know. That was the beginning, you know.
For sure, for sure. What was it like going to kind of your first shows and stuff like that? What was a couple of like live experiences that really like turned on your mind?
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Is like I always loved the live aspect of music and just like the energy, just the effect that music would have on people, because I would see how people respond to music. And my first actual concert was Pat Metheny, which is like a jazz musician. And I like, that was when I was like, okay, live music, that's my shit. Like, all I want to do is see live bands from now on. Like, that was just like blew my mind. I was like 14 years old when I saw Pat Metheny. And so then fast forward, my first like concert was Primus and the Meat Puppets.
Ah, sick.
Yeah, so I was really into Primus back then. Like that was kind of what was happening. I was in 8th grade when I saw that show, but then my first hardcore show was actually Earth Crisis and VOD.
Hey, Long Island in the building. Sick.
Yeah, so and there was all this preparation for it, you know, like I never going from like a concert to a show was just like such a big thing. And then like I had been listening to the underground music for a while at that point, but I hadn't, not for a while, but I hadn't gone to a show like on my own, like an underground show, like an all ages show, whatever. And I was straight edge at the time, so I was super into Earth Crisis. So I found out they were coming to town. Of course, I had to go. That was when Gomorrah Season Ends came out. And
hard record, man.
Yeah.
Fucking
super
hard.
like, and yeah, so that was my first show, and just like seeing all the kids with X's on their hands, like flying across the fucking room, like flying kicks in the air across the club. It was like my mind was blown, you know. It was like I felt like I was in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a certain like sensory experience that you have that you just can't replace that. Like I feel it's like everybody knows they can. I can't tell you what I did last week, but I could tell you the first time I really went to like a hardcore show and like really saw it and understood it, or like a punk show. Some of those formative times just like burned into my mind forever. That's why I always love to sort of ask about that, because it's like you can listen to the record, but then to see it and feel the emotion, the power of a couple hundred people in a room losing their shit is something else, right?
Well, that was the thing. Like that was my first introduction to the hardcore scene, and it was kind of like it felt like I entered a different portal, you know? Like you see like how people are moving. They're moving different. They're acting different. Everybody's kind of like on a different wavelength than they are at like a Primus concert or a Korn concert or whatever, you know? Sure. It's a different type of thing, and you feel this sense of like community and you feel like suddenly you feel like you're a part of something, and you feel like you found this like magical portal that you just like fell into and you never want to leave, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So once you started engaging with that stuff, you started going to shows in the local area, and you're really into that and stuff. How did Christensen, your first band, come to be? Which is, if you guys haven't heard it, it's an amazing post-hardcore band that was on Revelation. I used to listen to them a bunch back in the day. Super great.
Well, we were, you know, we started out, me and Brad were kind of we were still are inseparable, and like we wanted to start a band. We linked up with my friend Brandon, who was in a not like a rival band, but you know how you have like the other band that's kind of like you have like so me and Brad were in a band before that, and then so we enlisted Brandon, who was in another band that we would play with, and we kind of just like started making music that we wanted to make. Like I think in the beginning we were kind of like, let's make something that's a little bit less like heavy, because we were all like from super hardcore beginnings, so we kind of like started out making like a little bit prettier music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted girls to come to our shows. That was like our thing.
Hey,
Because it
okay.
wasn't really ever happening at a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those shows. So it evolved into like this kind of just like, it's weird because when I think about it, it feels more like we were just like a bunch of friends partying that happened to make music.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's kind of with organic beginnings, especially of bands that are all from, the internet didn't exist in the way that it does today when you're putting a band together and stuff. It really is like, I got to have people like in my area that I can fuck with and that like we're going to
Yeah,
figure this thing out, right? You
yeah,
can't
exactly.
like, you're not going to be like, hey, I'm going to email you a drum beat and get back to me.
Yeah,
That didn't exist.
it's totally a different thing. And then like we were young enough to where we just didn't give a shit about anything else. We were just like, fuck it, let's. In high school, like we were touring on the weekends. Like we were driving to Cincinnati, we were driving to Detroit, we were driving to Ohio, like Columbus, Ohio, like anywhere that was within 8 hours of us, we would go. We would make sure that we were booked every weekend. And I used to book all the shows because I kind of like took the reins on the like kind of management side of the band. So there was like back then, I don't know if you remember, there was a website called Book Your Own Fucking Life,
Yeah,
BYOFL.
yeah, definitely.
Yes. So I used to just book our tours, like hit up random people at their like AOL email addresses and like show up and play some shitty show, but we had fun, you know?
Sure, and it's a lot of those formative experiences and doing it yourself that really, there's no shortcuts. It teaches you so much. It teaches you how to play. It teaches you how to be a band, to understand what it takes, to
Yeah,
even travel and play music, right?
yeah,
As,
for sure.
as as younger people. When with Christensen, how would you kind of describe kind of the beginnings of your drum style? Because obviously you're drumming in that band, and then that started to take you kind of further. When did it start to kind of
Um,
coalesce for you that I'm like, hey, I think we have a thing here?
yeah, well, my drumming influences have always been like, I, as much as I listen to hardcore, I equally listen to just like, I think the thing that drew me to hardcore was the drumming, obviously. But at the same time, I was listening to a lot of techno, which is like I think why I like that Earth Crisis record so much, because it was really like felt kind of futuristic.
Hmm.
I was listening to a lot of Ronnie Size. I was listening to a lot of like LTJ Bukum. I was listening to just like Lords of Acid still, and I was learning to play drums to those techno records, playing along. So it kind of just like made me kind of like a machine a little bit in that way. And it was like I never played on a click track on our recordings,
Yeah.
um, which kind of like this guy Sal Villanueva. I don't know if you know him from Jersey. He produced our last record. He also we met him through he did the Thursday Full Collapse record.
Hmm.
So we really liked that record and we were friends with those guys. So we recorded our album with him and he was like, "What? You're not playing the click?" And I was like, "No." And then he took me off of the click and then he was like, "Oh, you don't even need the click. It's fine." So it
Yeah.
was like it was one of those things. But like I was super influenced by electronic music at the same time And
I
I think
always
that's
feel like your drum style always has like a really driving quality, propulsive quality to it. And in a way, I feel like that, especially with LTJ Bookham, like that, a lot of that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah.
You were always kind of, I felt like with Christensen, like pushing the band along, like here we go,
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted it. At a certain point, I wanted it to be a dance party. I wanted to like. It kind of goes into like me DJing now. Is like being a drummer, like you get to sit back and see how people react to what you're doing. So if you play, I mean, you have the control as a DJ. You can make everyone in the room sad. You can make everyone in the room happy. You could make everyone in the room break shit. You have literally control over the entire room. And as a drummer, it's very similar because you can just see like what you're doing is directly affecting the people that are watching you.
Absolutely. So that kind of more propulsive kind of
Yeah.
quality and what you were sort of going after, like a bit of a point of view. So with Christensen, you guys signed to Rev and stuff like that. When did it start to feel like, oh man, we're starting to do a little bit more here than like kind of your average band? And when did you guys start seeing a little bit of like, hey, maybe this music thing, I want to keep doing it a little bit more and more than like the average
Well,
weekend trip?
yeah, like, well, when we graduated, we were just like, let's just take off. Like, let's never be home. Like, our goal was just never be home.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, Louisville's fun, but it's like, it's one of those places where it's better if you can leave and then you come back and see your friends and you can hang. But if you're there the whole time, it's kind of a little draining. So we continued booking our own tours and shit. You know, back then you could make friends with bands and they would take you on tour. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like just jumping through hoops. Oh, I got to talk to my manager, my booking agent. Oh, like, well, this band paid to be on the tour, so I don't know if we can. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. There was none of that back then. So it was literally like there were so many situations where we were just playing shows with our friends. Like we would tour with our friends' bands, big and small. Like we used to tour. We did a tour that was well. Eventually, we got a booking agent. Jeremy, you probably know Jeremy Holgerson.
Yep, I do know
Yeah,
Jeremy
yeah,
Holgerson.
so he at the agency. He was at the agency group then. I'm not sure where he's at now, but shout out to Jeremy. He was booking us on, getting us on some really cool shows, and we used to play. It was a kind of situation back then, and you know it, but we would play at like this place in Connecticut called the LNG.
Yeah.
This is just an example of how it was back then. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but like Gerard from My Chemical Romance would hit me up and be like, "Hey man, will you guys like? We saw you're playing close by. Like, we'll play for free if you do doors like 30 minutes early. We'll just like do a quick set, and then you guys can go on." And like, of course, that was
Yeah.
long before like they became the My Chemical Romance that we know. But
Sure.
that just shows you like the way, kind of like the vibe of the scene back then, like before all of these all these variables were thrown in, in politics.
For sure. And that's I think a really important thing is that, as musicians, we have a lot of power to help one another out.
Yeah,
And, for people watching and everything, it's like never get it twisted, like bands helping bands and people with like-minded people helping like-minded people is always the way, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, and for anyone who has like agents, managers, everything else, they work for you. So
Yeah,
always remember that. You know what I
exactly.
mean? And that's really cool. And then again, it's like this is how you make friends and you start building stuff for one another. And then my chem's doing well, and they're like, "Hey, Christian, come play with us," or Thursday or something else. And it's like a
Yeah,
virtuous cycle.
yeah, and those got like the dudes from Thursday. Like I will be friends with them forever. You know what I mean? Like that was how it was back then. And it wasn't like on some like we just played with this band. It was like we're actually. It was in a way. It was just like it's really hard to explain. You know what I mean? Like the camaraderie that you build with other bands when you're like kind of in the same boat. Like can't really like fake that in any way.
Absolutely, and I think that it's with a bunch of different bands kind of coming up together and sort of seeing similar qualities in one another and kind of pushing
Yeah,
something together. So Christensen obviously, lasted for a while. and all of that. And then, you know, at a certain point, the band ended, and then you decided to kind of take off and go to New York City. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
what was that kind of like moment like for you, and why did you make the choice for New York?
Uh, that's a long story, but like basically the Christensen, like we put out the last album that we put out, and it was like we did like some really awesome tours. Like we toured with Glassjaw, we toured with like, you know, like Snapcase, you know, like our favorite bands we were touring with.
Sure.
And then and that was at the time when the music industry actually started to like kind of become more corporate. And it was a time when like I think like Island Def Jam signed like every hardcore band, like
Yeah, a
you
lot of
know,
them, a lot of them.
and all of our friends' bands were getting signed. Like we were a little bit more like at that time we were more on the like hardcore, like kind of like indie. Our music was like much more like heavy and more mathy, and we didn't want to take the deals that we were getting offered because we were like listening to Fugazi, like so we had that mindset, you know. We didn't want to like that was when selling out was still a thing before selling out. Now selling out is the only option to make it as a musician, you know.
Yeah,
You know what I
definitely.
mean?
Not as discussed.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Nike commercial, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. But so that was kind of like where we kind of like dissipated, and there's a lot of bands that were kind of a casualty of that happening to the hardcore scene. It's like you know you started to see a lot of the hardcore bands on MTV, and I mean it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. I guess it depends on how you want to look at it.
Sure. I think it definitely helps some folks, and for other folks, maybe it drove the band apart. There's a lot of different things, you know, but
Yeah,
it definitely lots of money and vibe and culture came into it. And, you know, those bands continue to be, and some of them went by the wayside.
yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like so like it felt as if like the hand of the major label industry like reached in and just like plucked out the soul of like the hardcore scene because it just changed. You know what I mean? Um, and you know that was when so like that all those things were happening, and we had been together at that time for 10 years, I think,
Yeah.
because we had gone through like some member changes and but we really hit it hard like the final 3 years of doing it. Like we were signed to Eulogy Recordings out of Florida, like before that. So we put out an EP and then we signed a Revelation. We did the tours. But yeah, towards the end, it was kind of like we'd been doing it for so long, and I was just kind of I really wanted to get out of Louisville, and I just knew that there was like more for me to see in life.
Sure.
Um, Kind of the same way that I was like I had a girl that I was dating for like 8 years, and I was like not ready to get married. So it was kind of like one of those similar situations, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you just kind of felt like, hey, I hit like kind of the max level here, and I want to take myself to kind of maybe another situation, another change of scenery, and
Yeah.
New York was your chosen destination. So getting to New York, what were your goals? How did the DJ thing kind of evolve for you?
Well, it's funny because like coming to New York, I met Dan Keys from he was in Recover at the time, and he comes up to me outside of a hardcore show in Louisville, and he's like, hey man, I've met you before. You know Dan? Do you know Dan?
I do know Dan,
All right, so
absolutely.
Dan's
A
vibe is
little
like
bit, but yeah.
his vibe is like, hey bro, I met you before, man. Like I know we met before, and I never met him before, and like he swore that he met me before. I know for a fact I never met him before because I didn't even know who Recover was, barely.
Hmm.
So so we end up, they become like kind of our buddy band, like Christensen tours with Recover a whole lot. And then fast forward, like Dan has a side project and he hits me up to play drums for it. And then he was like, yo, do you want to play drums like in my new project, Young Love? He was like already signed to Island Def Jam. So I said yes, and like literally moved to New York with like my dog my cymbal bag and my snare drum and like a tiny suitcase full of like a few pairs of clothes. And yeah, and it was definitely rough. Like I had no money. Like but I knew that I was starting from. I knew that it was the beginning of something, of a better situation.
Sure.
As a musician for me. And like I literally, so like Island, like so the label paid for my apartment in New York for the first like year that I lived here. So that was like a huge plus for me to relocate. The problem is I had no money for furniture, so I just like had an empty room and I didn't even have a blanket. I used my clothes and my dog as a pillow and like my snare drum. And yeah, until the first check came in, I was like, oh shit, like it was so crazy to get a check from playing music. Like that was just like, I never, like a check with my name on it for playing fucking drums. It was just it was like mind blowing to me. You know?
What is this? Oh yeah. My God. Yeah, no, crazy. For sure. And something very deserved, because obviously Young Love went on to do a bunch of great things, and I mean you were drumming for a pretty big band at the time, and I mean I think that you were in Young Love, and I think that's when I first met you, and I was like, man, this kid is an amazing drummer. He's like a little bit older than I am, I think, and just like the sky's the fucking limit for him. And then with Young Love, I sort of, and then the next moment, I feel like I started to see you start DJing like all around town. And was that just a product of like, hey, I got to figure out a hustle?
Well, yeah, it was basically like, so that was during like Young Love was the beginning of kind of a new era of like underground music, you know? Like I guess Young Love would be considered underground because because the sound was like, but this was like when blogs became a thing, like for just before blogs. Like this was when like Block Party was out, like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs were big, like TV on the Radio had just come out, like all of those household indie, massive indie names that we know of.
And many of them from New York too, so this is happening all around us. Like totally. You're like, oh, there's Julian Casablancas at some bar that you're at, and like, and over here is like Maddie Safer from the Rapture, you know what I mean? Who now is like your really good friend, and so on and so forth. It was just all around you if you were around it.
Yeah, and that was the time. That was like 2005.
Yeah,
and that was like, you know, there were so many things happening in that culture at that time that it was like American Apparel culture. You know, it was like this whole new like fucking. It was kind of like, it was whack, but it was kind of cool at the same time. You know, it was like kind of like that Vice magazine thing. It was definitely.
There were some good parties, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's what I was literally about to say. It was very party. It was very party. That was when brands started realizing that they should pour their money into like an entire culture.
Yeah,
and that's what was happening at that time. So Young Love, like we would play, and that was also the same time when like you would see like after party with the singer from Block Party DJing, so we don't have to pay for the whole band. You know, it was like that kind of thing. Yeah. And Young Love, there would be Young Love DJ sets, and Dan would be like, "Hey man, can you help me out?" And I would just be next to him playing, DJing, and that's kind of how it started.
Oh wow! So it was just like as that kind of function of like, yeah, Young Love after party after the Rapture plays or something at whatever bar, and that's just how you started getting into it. And then I think at that time too, a lot of people need to know the Lower East Side, that sound was kind of taking over New York. So I mean, if you went to you know, bars all over the place, from Motor City, Darkroom, Lit, all over the place, there was just, you know, a lot of this kind of music being played. I feel like you really like just slid in there and became like the best DJ in that scene pretty quick.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, and that was the thing, is like, it was, I started DJing more out of necessity than out of like a passion to become a DJ.
Yeah.
Because like, you know how it is, like the hardest thing about being a touring musician is not being on tour. And like
Yeah.
that time that you're at home when you're like, okay, now what? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just here with no money, and I'm like not even like technically in the band. I'm just like the drummer for the band. So how am I gonna make money now? So DJing was it for me.
And what did it like eventually, obviously it kind of turned into a little bit more of a passion once you kind of started getting into it a bit more.
Yeah, it was, and like, well, this whole time I eventually left Young Love. I started playing with Santi Gold. I played with her for like we did a tour with Coldplay, like an arena tour, which was insane. And then after that, she went to like having just a DJ or whatever. And then I played with Hearts Revolution, which was a girl boy duo who that was interesting because that was at a different kind of explosion in the culture, in the scene. It was like the beginning of blogs. So like not the beginning of blogs. Blogs have been around, but it was like Hype Machine had come out, and
Yeah, yeah.
it was
All
like
that
when
kind of stuff.
you could like you could get popular from having your song reblogged a bunch of times. So like they had a song CYOA that just like took off on the blogs, and they were like, how do we're getting offered money, a lot of money to play like all over the world, and we have no idea, like we never played a show, we just have these songs on these blogs.
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah,
And that
so
was really funny. I mean, I feel like that happened a lot with when we started Witch House happened and certain things like that. And it's like, we're like a bedroom project, and now we got to kind of
yeah,
figure it the fuck out. So they called you.
yeah, so like I joined to play drums for the live show, and that was fun. Same thing, like I would DJ the after parties. I would also DJ like I was DJ, like if we play in Italy, I would DJ in Italy, and I just like, and it just happened. It's kind of cheating for me to DJ because I'm a drummer, so it's like I'm like matching two beats and like making sure no one stops moving,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
totally. It's like
so
you've been training for that your whole life without even knowing it in a way,
yeah,
right?
exactly. It goes back to what I was saying about like being able to sit back and see how people respond to like what you're putting out.
Sure. So, what was it like then from going from Christensen to coming to kind of becoming like this in-demand drummer who was kind of, a part of it, but, in a way, kind of a more of a hired gun and working with new people and new energies a lot. I mean, from
Yeah.
going from like a more close-knit kind of thing, how did that kind of feel for you?
Well, the thing is like the way that the projects that I played with, I feel like they were all a part of a different version of the hardcore scene. Like when I say that, I mean like the hardcore scene was this community, and it was like this thing that was happening that if you were there, then you know what the fuck it was about. If you weren't there, it's like almost impossible to explain it to anyone.
Yeah,
And like the same thing with the dance punk thing, like playing with Young Love. It was like that was a thing that was happening at that moment, and I was involved in during that era. And then the blog thing, and like Webster Hall parties every Friday. That was just like any that was if you were there, then you know what I'm saying.
sure. Yeah,
And
definitely.
and so it's all very like tied in together, even though all of the music projects are kind of like they make sense to me, but I don't know if they would make sense to anyone else.
Yeah, I think honestly, when you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, maybe this dude's sort of like a drummer for hire kind of guy, and like, or like he was in a hardcore band and then it became something like this. But the way that you kind of explain that narrative, I really understand it. It feels to me like, yes, it's like just this sort of common community of people that kind of has grown and changed over time, and maybe different strains break off into different ways, but like
Yeah,
you followed like kind of your own path to that to all of a sudden you're playing with Santi Gold in like an arena or some shit, and you're like, "Fuck, how did I get here? I was playing
yeah,
VFW halls like 6 years ago or something
yeah,
like that,
exactly.
right?"
Yeah, totally.
Um, when did you realize that you wanted to kind of start your own project again and kind of get like Hustle Club together?
Man, that was kind of I started Hustle Club like kind of out of anger because I was so tired of playing for other people, and I was like, what am I gonna do if I've had this like extensive music career and I've just been like playing for other people the whole time. When I have like all of these other things that I can do, like I can play guitar, I can sing, obviously play drums. And so I started Hustle Club from, so like there was this band Foreign Islands. Do you remember them?
Yeah, Dean Paltalonis, man. Dean actually
Yeah.
made every single Primitive Weapons record. So
Oh, wow.
me and Dean are good buds,
I
man.
had no idea. That's crazy.
Yep.
Shout out to Dean and Mark
Big
Ryan.
shout out to Dean and Mark Ryan, man. Mark signed for Super Touch, of course.
Yeah.
Hardcore Originals. And
OG.
Dean, big block 454, Boston Hardcore.
Yeah, man.
But a great producer, did everything from like, Madball to the Hold Steady. So,
Yeah.
Dean's the fucking shit.
Yeah, so Dean, so I was playing, goes along with the hired gun thing. I was playing drums on, actually like Alan Cage from Quicksand, right?
Alan played in Foreign Islands, yeah.
Yeah, so he like left the band, so that was like a mind fuck for me, because it kind of like takes me all the way back to the beginning. It's like he couldn't, like he left the band or whatever, and so they had these new songs they wanted to record, so I recorded those songs. And instead of them paying me, I was like, just let me record these ideas that I have. Like, I just wanted Dean to like just like let me get these ideas out that I've had like for a long time. And we started recording Hustle Club songs, and then like he was like, man, this is like pretty awesome. We should just keep doing this. So then it became a thing. Yeah.
So Dean was the one, so it was kind of like a little barter for a session, basically.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%. So yeah, so me and Dean were like, I was in Dean's studio, like in Long Island City, like recording. Like I would play and I had no idea what I was doing, because I'd never done anything other than play drums in a studio. So I would play the drum beat, and then I would pick up the bass, noodle around on the bass. Same with guitar. Some of the songs are already written in my head, like the skeleton of the song is written in my head. And then it was just like, we were like busting out songs. And then it was time to find a live band. And the first person that I got to join the band was like Todd Weinstock, who played guitar in Glassjaw, which I know him from when Christensen used to tour with Glassjaw.
Yeah.
And this kid Marcus Price, who I also knew from like the hardcore era, and that was kind of my way of like giving myself like some sort of giving myself a taste of like what I really truly loved, like missed about music, which was just like playing music with friends and like having fun, and like more like music that wasn't for money, you know what I mean? And it was just kind of, I was kind of fed up with that.
Yeah, like we needed to express something, because I think that sometimes, when people kind of fly close to the sun of being like a very big act and things of those natures,
yeah,
obviously maybe sometimes you start losing sight of the things that made things good in the first place. You know what I mean?
And I see like a lot of my friends that are in these bands, and it's just like you lose the whole passion of like why you began doing this in the first place.
Sure. So Hustle Club was a return to that sort of feeling. And honestly, to me, out of everything like Post Christensen and Hustle Club and Rare Form, the stuff that you put together yourself is like, I mean, I love Hustle Club. I thought that record was great, and everything that you were doing, and like the stuff that you were doing, and playing with Sal Principato from Liquid Liquid, and like seeing you do that and stuff like that, I felt like it was new, but also really honoring a lot of like kind of New York City kind of like new wave and goth things, and I thought that you were just really onto a lot of like really good energies there and stuff like that.
Well, that was also, I started doing that when I had more time to like the touring schedule had calmed down, so that was at the point when I had more time to like actually live in New York City and like really take it all in. And then it was like I became obsessed with like downtown New York, so it was ironic that I started playing with Sal from Liquid Liquid, because he's a legend. And Hustle Club's our rehearsal space was at the Liquid Liquid rehearsal space that was under the old Max Fitch that he had since the 80s.
Damn, I never knew that. That's sick.
Yeah. So like, and it was all kind of just like, I just suddenly became like super into just like making music for downtown New York. You know. Sorry.
No, it's all good, man. It
got
happens. It
got a little
happens.
got a little excited. Where are we
We
at? There we are.
There you are. It's all good. We're back, baby.
We're back.
And that's definitely really interesting because I felt like a lot of the stuff that was happening, like at the time with like post punk in New York and like the Rapture and the AAs and stuff like that was pulling from a lot of that era too, especially
Yeah.
stuff like LCD Sound System and stuff too. It was
Oh, yeah,
like
for sure.
absolutely like really referencing New York in itself just in a new era, and I thought Hustle Club did that like really really great. Uh, am I right that your wife made that video
Yeah,
for you guys?
She did two of the videos. Yeah, she did a Good Morning Midnight video, and she did the Quarantinators video. And
Oh, okay.
she's in the Quarantinators video.
Ah, yeah. Because Good Morning Midnight. If you guys haven't seen that video, it's amazing. Super cool. Just super like kind of fucked up party occult vibes. Just really really fun. Really really great. If you and a really really catchy song too.
Yeah, you know, it's weird. I never released that song except for that music video.
Oh, really? It's just not anywhere?
I mean, it's not anywhere. It's not on Spotify. Like, it's only on YouTube in the form of that video. But that came out before Spotify, and that was still the era when you had to release a physical form of music. You know?
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about releasing it and like just to have it out.
You should, man. Absolutely.
Like,
I'm gonna make a deal on the air. You gotta do it, man. What the fuck?
What's funny about that song is Calvin Harris. Like I'm randomly am friends with Calvin Harris from from when he was making dance funk music, not from the Rihanna era of Calvin Harris.
Mm-hmm.
But he used to hit me up when he was in town. So like the first ever Hustle Club show, he came. And he, like, still, if I see him, he asks me about Good Morning Midnight. And he's like, last time, I'm not sure if he was kidding, but he was like, I want to, like, use that chorus. So
yeah, it's a great chorus.
Send me that.
Dude, Calvin, send my boy some cash, man. Get on the remix, and then we can talk. You know what I'm saying? Hustle Club, incredible band, and all of that. And then it seemed like for a while, then you kind of focused a little bit more in on DJing, and then like, what was that sort of period between kind of Hustle Club and Rare Form? How did that kind of work for you?
Well, the DJing thing just became like, it became more in demand, like DJ, and also, but kind of like with everything else, it started as supplying like a service to the culture. You know what I mean? Like throwing cool parties, doing shit like illegal after hours, just like we did after hours in like churches, in a synagogue, in a movie theater, in fucking abandoned like apartment buildings. Obviously like Lit and Dark Room were like super debaucherous venues at the time, and that was kind of like a part of just like that downtown New York thing. It wasn't like I see it as like an extension of Hustle Club, essentially, or maybe Hustle Club was an extension of that. I was really just into what was happening, like the people that were around, like the people that you would see. It was very reminiscent of like what you would have seen in the 80s in New York, downtown,
Sure, yeah, definitely.
And then like all things, it dissipates, So the bars, all of our favorite clubs and bars went away, and then now I'm stuck DJing super corporate venues, making more money than I have, like in any other situation. But so it's like oh, go ahead.
No, I said, how do you feel about that transition and stuff like that, where it kind of became something a little bit more of the lines where, it came out of music culture, and now you're kind of like, hey, I'm just a great fucking DJ. You can hire me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I mean, a lot of people that come from hardcore are doing things that are much less involved in music than DJing at clubs, you know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
So it's kind of like, although like I don't it started out like the music that I play at these clubs was kind of like, I was like, I guess I'll play this, I guess I'll go there. But you know, I eventually, like, I had to just go all the way and play like the club music, you know.
Sure. Shut up and
But
play the
yeah,
hits.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's kind of obvious, but I think I bring something different to the table because I have like a little bit like broader music knowledge. Like, I could at any point drop like a song by Sensefield, and people would be like, "What?" Like, one person in the room would be like, "What?" What?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there was times when I used to DJ at like the Diesel store when I was learning how to DJ, and they would book DJs to have like the shifts were like as long as the store was open. It'd be like an 8-hour shift of DJing, and I would drop shit like Jimmy Eat World and Promise Ring, and like people would be like, "Yo, are you playing a Promise Ring right now?" Like it was mixed in with like everything else, like the current stuff, but then I would just like drop it to see what would happen.
Yeah,
And
for
like,
sure.
and it's like, it's a good reminder that, because sometimes it feels like the hardcore scene that I know never happened. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it feels like it could have been just a made up fantasy in my head if I wasn't reminded by people like you and like people that are like doing things that keep it going, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, you know, you're a busy guy. I mean, we've just tracked through like, you know, 20 years plus of music, and, you know, you've played in many bands, played drums all around the world, DJ'd all around the world, and we're just kind of sitting here talking, and it feels like sometimes, even now, like, you know, I mean, I haven't gone to a show in fucking months. You haven't DJ'd in months. It almost feels like fucking years, like
Yeah,
ages ago,
yeah,
like a
totally.
different life. And it's easy to feel that until you kind of have to talk about it and you know, bring things back into context and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
for
you
sure.
know. And it seemed, you know, just for me, I was just like, you know, I loved Hustle Club. I kind of didn't know exactly what happened to it for a while, and then I was like, oh, Terry just kind of became like this fucking great fucking DJ, and you know, he's doing great. I mean, he's DJing for Gucci over here, he's doing this and that, and I'm like, dude, he's doing awesome, but you know, he hasn't made music in a while, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden, Rare Form creeps up, and I, you know, again, like Hustle Club, I love Rare Form. I think it really does something amazing with R&B and goth music in a way that kind of turns it into something else. And the visual is really beautiful, and you get the sort of the same impact of the songwriting of Hustle Club, which I really liked. I thought Hustle Club was really catchy, but it kind of has this more kind of, you know, lower and slower and sexier sort of feel to it. And it seems like you took a while to just come to that vibe. How did that sort of happen?
yeah. I mean, it's really kind of I like to reinvent myself, you know, to keep it exciting. Just like every like you know, like I've explained to you the trajectory of my musical career. Like, every time I'm doing something kind of in a different scene. So like, some people know me as the DJ Prince Terrence. Some people know me as like that guy that they just like see out. Some people know me as the drummer from Christensen. Some people know me as the drummer from Hearts
Yeah,
Revolution, Santi Gold, whatever. I played with Major Lazer. Some people know me only from that. Like, it's like, part of that whole thing is like taking some time to just not like, life is short, like, so you really need to
sure,
like not stick with one thing, you know what I mean? I think it's really
for
important
sure,
that you like explore like the world, like
sure.
musically, or like ideas, like your creativity, especially if you, even if like having things that you've wanted to do. So like, it took me a while to get there, to get from my hardcore, like my heart and soul lies in hardcore music, and getting from there to Rare Form, which is like gothy love songs, you know.
Sure.
um
Terry, I hate to cut you off, but we only have 30 seconds left.
oh, okay, yeah,
So I know this flies by. I just want to say thank you for
yeah, man,
coming on. Guys, you also have to check out Cellvision, which is Terry's amazing platform. He pushes tons of cool new artists. Rare Form is his current project. Catch up with everything that we've talked about, and go to Cell Vision. They got amazing stuff.